community, my name is Janelle. Welcome back to my channel. And if you're new, welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of my new videos. Avoidant attachment. I recognize the telltale signs of avoidant attachment from my own personal experiences of being an avoidant and from also being a counselor. I'm personally actively working on developing a secure base for myself, but it's not always easy. As an avoidant, we often engage in behaviors that we're not really aware of, and we believe that we're living this normal, balanced life. For example, I want to share a fictional therapy dialogue that typically happens between a therapist and someone who's avoidant. So it's going to start off with the therapist asking, "How was your childhood?" "Fine. Nothing too special. Tell me about it." "There's nothing to tell. It was pretty normal." "Have you ever experienced loss, abandonment, or abuse?" "No, not really. I mean, Dad wasn't around. Is that considered abandonment?" "Anyway, it wasn't even a big deal. I wasn't affected. He's in my life now, and we're fine. Listen, I'm only here because my partner thinks I avoid things. He also thinks I have trust issues. He accused me of not trusting him because I never ask him for help. However, I don't agree." "Okay, well, what do you think the issue is?" "There is no issue. He just wants me to cry and be all vulnerable. I'm someone who's very independent. He wants me to tell him that I'm sad. That's just not me. I'm not a crier. I'm sorry to say, but crying is for the weak. The past is the past, and it's time to move on." "Can you tell me a little bit about your past?" "I don't remember everything. However, I think my boyfriend is projecting. He had his own issues growing up, and he's a bit sensitive. Since I am here, maybe we can discuss why he's so emotional. It's taking a toll on our relationship and it's making me feel uncomfortable." So this is an example of someone who is avoidant steering the conversation away from what might be distressing events from their childhood, perhaps related to their father. And they're also normalizing their childhood even though they don't remember all aspects of their childhood. Not once did they mention emotions, and they tried deflecting the conversation away from themselves and making it about their partner being too sensitive. The fictional character came across as strong, put together, and stoic and independent. In this video, I'm going to discuss what an avoidant attachment means, different coping strategies to be aware of, and the negative consequences, as well as my final thoughts. Let's dive in. What exactly does avoidant attachment mean? Well, avoidant attachment is characterized by the minimization of hurtful attachment experiences. So when trauma occurs within the family, especially with immediate caregivers such as mom or dad, folks have a tendency to engage in defenses that shield them away from attachment-related stress. So attachment therapists such as Annette Cusson, she identified some traits of an avoidant attachment, which includes, number 1, a need to feel independent and self-sufficient. Number 2, not reliant on others. Number 3, avoid feelings of vulnerability, sadness, fear, and a need for closeness. Number 4, you focus on your career activities and you avoid intimacy. Number 5, you suppress feelings and your needs. Number 6, they distance themselves from others who may reject them. And number 7, experience success in their careers and activities, but they are emotionally distant in relationships. Dr. Muller mentioned that folks with avoidant attachment have learned to pretend over the years. They pretend that their childhood was normal, they pretend that there is nothing wrong and nothing bothers them, and they pretend that everything is okay. They are so good at pretending that they've even convinced themselves that there is nothing wrong. Trust me, I can attest to this because I didn't realize how I came across to the world. This is why folks with an avoidant attachment can get a reputation with some therapists as being difficult to treat. So cracking the outer shell of someone who deems themselves in their behavior as perfectly normal can be a challenging task. If the therapist doesn't utilize an attachment lens, the person may be written off or they may be referred to another therapist for support. So where does this all stem from? I often tell my clients that we don't just wake up feeling and thinking a particular way about ourselves and the world around us. It has to stem from somewhere, especially when it comes to attachment-related issues and intrafamilial trauma. The internal working model develops in infancy and is based on our interaction with our caregiver. That interaction determines the perception we have of ourselves and the expectations of attachment figures. For example, if an infant cries for hours with an unresponsive mother beside them, that interaction will determine the expectation that that infant has of their mother and other attachment figures. This is different from trying to sleep train your baby or allowing them to self-soothe. The following 4 points are some of the traits that describe the development of avoidant attachment in toddlers according to Annette Cusson. Number 1, rejecting mothers and caregivers that don't tend to their needs. Number 2, infants begin to recognize that their caregiver will not respond to their needs and they will only respond to them in an indifferent or a hostile manner. Number 3, infants eventually deny their own needs and avoid interactions with their caregiver. And number 4, toddlers may appear independent, but this is based on the belief that they have to take care of themselves since they can't trust the adult that's in their life. Because of this, we develop coping strategies over the years to minimize the distress caused by attachment-related figures. So the number 1 coping strategy used is called deactivation. Deactivation is described as a shift away from events or feelings that arouse the attachment system. So individuals avoid difficult emotions and they bypass memories of painful attachment experiences with caregivers. Doing so takes away the pain and hurt by creating a fictional story about one's true experience. Deactivation is a way of survival for avoidance. The difficult part of this is that they don't even recognize what they're doing. To them, this is normal behavior. For example, Jane is attending therapy and her therapist is conducting the initial assessment. Jane mentions that her father was not always in her life growing up and she was fine with it. A lot of kids grow up without a father, she says. It didn't bother me. However, what Jane keeps hidden under her tough exterior is that she used to cry every weekend when her father never showed up to pick her up, or that when he was around, he was verbally and physically abusive towards her mother. Folks with avoidant attachment tend to retreat from psychological pain and vulnerability. To be vulnerable means to be weak. Being weak takes away from the projection of strength and having a normal life. Another coping strategy is minimization, which is an important component of deactivation. The person downplays the emotional impact an experience had on their life. And it can look like the following 3 examples that I'm going to mention. I was speaking to my mom and she brought up my weight gain again in front of my aunts. Not a big deal. I'm used to it. She used to ridicule me for shopping in the plus size section as a child. She was only looking out for me because she didn't want me to die from obesity. When I was 9, my dad would give my mom and I the silent treatment for weeks. He was always mad about something. Eventually, we learned to ignore it. My mom and I would laugh about it all the time. I didn't really care. He couldn't break me. Yeah, I was bullied as a kid. One time I was put in the hospital. Honestly, a lot of kids were bullied. I remember this one kid who had to give up his lunch money every single day. It happens to the best of us. Not a big issue. Kids will be kids. Did you guys notice that each scenario was void of emotions? Not one of them said what happened to them was wrong. We control the scenario by letting folks know what we want them to know, and if we minimize, laugh it off, or normalize what can be seen as abnormal, we can predict the other person's response and move on. In the first scenario, the woman justified her mom's behavior by saying it was coming from a good place. It's coming from love. The second person normalized her father's behavior by saying it happened so often that she and her mom laughed about it. And the third person, they completely glossed over their hospitalization, which was presumably from a violent attack, and he focused on the other child who was also being bullied. That situation was also normalized and seen as common behavior. The normalization of abnormal behavior is a form of protection and self-deception. It maintains the I'm normal thinking and removes us from the feelings of pain and rejection. Another coping strategy is called parental idealization. I'm sure some of you remember me mentioning Judith Herman. She is a psychiatrist and trauma expert, She believes that idealization is an attempt to preserve the image of a parent and maintain faith in their ability. They place blame and rage on the non-offending parent while the parent that committed the abuse was protected. So growing up, it was safer to blame the non-offending parent because they wouldn't endure punishment. So I'm going to read you an example of a young man. She taught me how to be a man. My mom had to knock me around a few times, LOL. I was a wild teen. She knew what needed to be done. Besides, my dad was weak. He just sat there and did nothing. My mom also gave it to him as well. He appeared to be afraid of her. Can you believe that? What a wimp. I turned out fine and I can protect myself and my kids. I'm not weak. I turned out fine and it was normal behavior. Stop trying to make it sound like child abuse. In contrast to that script, some kids idealize the non-offending parent and crucify the offending parent. The non-offending parent was also viewed as a victim in order to justify why they weren't protected and provided with safety growing up. If a child was physically and verbally abused growing up by their father, and they also saw their mother being abused, the child may see their mom as a victim who also needed to be protected. At the core of avoidant attachment is fear of rejection, fear of emotional unavailability, shame, loneliness, and painful memories. However, that is often masked with self-reliance. With self-reliance comes a lack of trust for others. I remember my own situation of not trusting others. I only relied on myself. I presented as strong, cold, distant, and a one-woman army. I was so quick to be dismissive of others, and I detached myself from anything that created vulnerability. To me, that meant weakness. However, looking back at my younger self, I was very unaware. Self-reliance equals control and comfort. We don't need help, we don't want help, and we don't ask for help. And we don't trust that anyone could actually help us. Self-reliance falls under the umbrella of self-perception. Many folks with avoidant attachment perceive themselves as independent, strong, self-reliant, and normal. Have you ever prided yourself for not being someone who cries or someone who gets emotional? Have you ever prided yourself in your academic or your work achievements or your materialistic items? Many of us are walking around this world not realizing we are engaging in behavior that can only hurt us in the long run. There are negative consequences to deactivation. As much as we, meaning avoidant folks, think we are maintaining control, deactivation is actually a poor way of coping, and you want to stay far away from it as possible. When we experience high stress, our protective barrier starts to collapse, which can cause health problems and mental health challenges. Some health problems can include cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure. High stress can break down the coping strategy of deactivation, causing increased depression, anxiety, poor self-image, and psychosomatic symptoms. Although there is a deep desire for connection, the fear of rejection and other accompanying emotions can be very overwhelming, resulting in a lack of close relationships. When our protective barrier breaks down, our vulnerabilities start to shine, and we become more aware of our loneliness. Our true fragile nature overshadows our need to appear normal and strong. However, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that is called earned security. Just to briefly touch on earned security, it is a subcategory of secure attachment. Folks who start off with an insecure attachment can eventually develop a secure attachment. They will have the following traits: positive sense of self, comfortably sharing emotional bonds with others, they feel content around others, they can describe their childhood in a coherent and balanced way, and they can show a healthy balance of intimacy and independence. I can definitely resonate with having an avoidant attachment. I remember thinking that I wasn't like the rest of the people who experienced abandonment or rejection. I always thought that I was above it all and that it never really affected me. I thought that I was strong and not weak. I didn't realize that I was numb, distant, unforgiving, and dismissive of my own emotions. I would always ask others how they were doing and how their day was in order to keep the focus off of myself. That is a way of me controlling the situation, and I lived on an island by myself. No one could be trusted, and I was the only one who could fix my problems. The thought of being vulnerable with another person was very uncomfortable, to say the least. So with a lot of self-reflection and continued hard work and caring people who didn't give up on me, I was able to recognize my own avoidance. Awareness, patience, and introspection is an important start for change to begin. However, without that awareness, avoidant folks will walk through life not realizing that there's so much more that they can experience outside of their protective bubble. If you made it to the end of this video, thanks for watching. Let me know what are some of the other videos you want to see next. Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, as it definitely helps my channel grow. Bye for now.